Adanna had once been a loyal and loving wife, but her husband worked far away from the village and was often gone for months at a time, leaving Adanna lonely and longing for companionship. Over time, her heart turned to her husband's younger brother, Kayode, who had always admired her from a distance. They began meeting in secret, hiding deep in the forest where no one would see them. It was there, under the cover of trees and shadows, that their forbidden affair blossomed. But soon, their secret love came with a heavy burden. Adanna became pregnant. Panicking, they discussed what to do. Kayode, terrified of his brother discovering the truth, feared for his life if the affair was ever revealed. They decided there was only one solution. Adanna would give the child away, hiding their shame forever. Adanna and Kayode continued to meet in the forest, their conversations filled with fear and desperation. "What will we do when the child is born?" Adanna asked, her voice trembling. Kayode, his heart heavy, replied, "We'll have to give him away. If my brother ever finds out, he'll kill me." They knew the birth of the child could destroy everything, and so they made the painful decision to hide the pregnancy and give the baby away once it was born. The forest became their place of secrecy, where they planned the future of the child they could never keep. Months passed, and when the time came, Adanna gave birth in secret. She journeyed far into the forest, alone, determined to keep the child hidden from everyone. Under the dark canopy of trees, she brought a baby boy into the world, with no one to witness his birth. She looked at him with both love and sadness, knowing she could not keep him. But before she said goodbye, she noticed something. On his right arm was a small birthmark. It was the only thing that would ever help her identify him if she were to find him again. With tears streaming down her face, Adanna wrapped the baby carefully and handed him over to a distant village where no one knew his true identity. Years passed. Adanna kept her secret hidden, and soon she had another child, this time a daughter by her husband. She named her daughter Kelechi, and Kelechi brought joy into her life. But despite the happiness her daughter brought, Adanna could never fully forget the son she had given away. At night, in the quiet of her home, Adanna would dream of her son. In her dreams, he appeared as a young boy, looking up at her with wide, innocent eyes. He would ask her, "Mother, why did you give me away?" Each time, Adanna would wake with tears in her eyes, her heart heavy with guilt. She prayed fervently, hoping that wherever he was safe and cared for. But the fear of what had become of him never left her. She couldn't shake the feeling that one day the truth would catch up with her. And even as she held Kelechi close, the memory of her son lingered in her heart, like a shadow that followed her every step. Years later, Kelechi had grown into a beautiful young woman, full of life and curiosity. One day, she met a young man named Bolaji from a nearby village. He was kind, hardworking, and handsome, everything Kelechi had dreamed of in a partner. As they spent more time together, their connection deepened, and soon they fell in love. But there was something that made Kelechi uneasy. While Bolaji was open about his life with his grandmother, he rarely spoke about his parents. Anytime she asked about his family, he would avoid the question or give vague answers. He spoke of his grandmother with love and respect, saying she had raised him alone since he was a baby, but nothing more. Kelechi couldn't help but feel a strange fear gnawing at her. Why didn't he talk about his parents? And what was he hiding? Though she loved Bolaji deeply, the unanswered questions left her feeling unsettled, as if something important was missing between them. The day finally came when Kelechi decided to bring Bolaji home to meet her mother. Adanna was excited to meet the young man her daughter had fallen in love with. And when Bolaji stepped into their home, she was immediately drawn to him. There was something familiar about him, an unspoken bond that stirred deep emotions within her. As they spent time together, Adanna found herself feeling strangely protective of Bolaji. She noticed how kind and gentle he was, how his eyes carried a certain warmth she couldn't quite place. But then, it happened. As Bolaji rolled up his sleeve to help with a task, Adanna's heart stopped. There, on his right arm, was the small, crescent-shaped scar, the very same mark her son had been born with all those years ago. Adanna's world spun, her breath caught in her throat, and her mind raced. Could it be? Could this young man, the one her daughter loved so dearly, be the same son she had given away in secret? She stared at the scar in disbelief, her heart pounding. A wave of panic washed over her. How could she tell Kelechi that she was about to marry her half-brother? She tried to steady herself, but the weight of the truth was crushing. She knew she couldn't keep silent forever, but how could she possibly explain this to Kelechi? The secret she had buried for so long had resurfaced, threatening to destroy everything. Adanna was trapped, her guilt and fear growing with every moment. Troubled by the shocking realization that Bolaji was her son, Adanna sought the guidance of the village elder. She knew she couldn't keep this secret forever, but the thought of revealing the truth to Kelechi and her husband filled her with dread. The elder listened carefully as Adanna explained her fears, the scar on Bolaji's arm, and the painful secret she had carried for years. The elder, a wise and trusted figure in the village, gently placed a hand on Adanna's shoulder and said, "The truth, no matter how difficult, will always find its way to the light. You must tell Kelechi before it's too late. If she finds out another way, the consequences could be even worse." Adanna trembled with fear. She wasn't just worried about her daughter, but also about her husband, who had no idea about her affair with Kayode. How could she reveal everything without destroying her family? The elder's words echoed in her mind. But still, Adanna hesitated. She was terrified of the truth and its power to unravel everything she had built. Unable to rest, Adanna quietly sought out Bolaji's grandmother, the woman who had raised him since he was a baby. She approached the old woman with care, asking subtle questions about Bolaji's past. It didn't take long for the truth to be confirmed. Bolaji was indeed the son she had given away all those years ago. The grandmother spoke fondly of how she had taken him in, never knowing who his real parents were. Adanna's heart sank. There was no more doubt. The son she had abandoned in secret was now the man her daughter loved. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, and she knew there was no turning back. But how could she break this news to Kelechi without shattering her heart? With the truth weighing heavily on her heart, Adanna knew she could no longer remain silent. Before anything else, she went to Kayode, her husband's brother, and confessed everything. Their affair, the child they had in secret, and the terrible reality that Bolaji, the son they had given away, was now in love with Kelechi. Kayode was stunned, his face pale with fear and guilt. Together, they knew what they had to do. Adanna and Kayode called a meeting with both families, knowing that the time had come to confess their sins. In front of everyone, they laid bare the truth. Adanna spoke first, her voice trembling as she revealed the affair that had taken place years ago while her husband was away. Kayode stood beside her, his head bowed in shame. Together, they admitted that Bolaji was the son, the child Adanna had secretly given away. The room fell silent as their confession settled in. Kelechi's face turned pale as she processed what her mother had just said. "No," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Tears welled up in her eyes, and in a moment of overwhelming shock and heartache, Kelechi ran from the house, disappearing into the forest, her sobs echoing in the distance. Bolaji stood frozen, his mind struggling to grasp the horrifying truth. His entire life had been a lie. The woman he loved, Kelechi, was his half-sister. He broke down, collapsing onto the ground in tears, his heart shattered by the revelation. All the pieces of his past that he couldn't understand finally made sense, but it brought him nothing but pain. Amid the chaos, Adanna's husband rose to his feet, his face hard and filled with fury. He could not believe what he was hearing. His wife, the woman he trusted, had betrayed him with his own brother. The pain was too much to bear. Without hesitation, he announced that he was filing for divorce, his voice cold and unfeeling. He couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies. As Adanna and Kayode stood watching the wreckage of their past unfold, they were left in silence, overwhelmed by the devastation their choices had caused. The truth was out, and there was no escaping it now. Their family was shattered, torn apart by the secrets they had buried for so long. Many months passed after the painful truth was revealed. The village, once filled with whispers of betrayal, slowly returned to its usual rhythm. But for Kelechi, Adanna, and Bolaji, the healing process was far from simple. The weight of their family's brokenness lingered in every moment. Yet, as time went on, Kelechi realized that the only way forward was through forgiveness. Kelechi, still hurting from the shocking revelation, found the strength to forgive her mother. She knew that holding on to anger would only keep the pain alive. So, one evening, she sat with Adanna, her voice trembling but determined. "I forgive you, Mama," she said softly, tears welling in her eyes. "I know you made mistakes, but I still love you. I can't change the past, but we can try to move forward." Adanna, overwhelmed with gratitude and relief, embraced her daughter tightly. She had feared losing Kelechi forever, but in this moment, she felt the first glimpse of hope. The two of them cried together, their bond slowly beginning to heal. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step toward mending what had been broken. Kelechi also reached out to Bolaji. Though it was difficult at first, she began to see him, not as the man she had fallen in love with, but as a brother, the family she had never known. They shared quiet moments together, learning to embrace their new reality. Kelechi, with time, grew to love Bolaji, not as a romantic partner, but as the brother he truly was. Meanwhile, Adanna's husband went ahead with the divorce. His heart had been too deeply wounded to remain in the marriage. But even though the relationship had ended, he found it in himself to forgive Adanna. "I forgive you," he told her one day, his voice filled with sadness, but also with peace. "We can't be together anymore, but I want you to know that I don't hold this against you." Kayode, overwhelmed with guilt for the pain he had caused, decided to leave the village. He moved to a distant place, giving the family space to heal. Though he stayed in contact with Bolaji, he knew that his presence would only reopen old wounds. His departure allowed the family to begin rebuilding their lives, one step at a time. Though the journey had been filled with heartache, betrayal, and difficult truths, the family slowly began to heal. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined their future. And as the sun set over the village, there was a sense of peace, a quiet understanding that the truth, no matter how painful, had finally set them free. With time, the family learned to move forward. Kelechi and Bolaji maintained a strong bond as siblings, and though their past was filled with secrets, they chose to live in truth from that moment on. Adanna, now living with the consequences of her past, focused on rebuilding her relationships, not just with her children, but with herself. Though life had not turned out as she had imagined, she knew that in the end, the truth had brought them freedom.